Hello, my name is Anne, and today I will be discussing the Thai Daycare Massacre. We'll begin by where and when did the incident occur. It occurred very recently, October 6th of 2022, and it occurred in the Nong Bao Lam Phu province in Thailand. And this particular province is a very agricultural one, and it actually has the highest rate of poverty in all of Thailand. And just a little bit more of a background for Thailand is that 90% of the population is Theravada Buddhist, which will come into play later when we talk about the funeral rites for the victims. Who caused the incident was Panya Kamrub. He was a 34-year-old ex-police officer. He was actually fired from the police department after he was discovered with methamphetamine. After drug testing him following his death, they did not discover any methamphetamine in his system at the time. He legally owned the pistol that was used for some of the killings. He also used a knife and a shotgun in the killings, but it was not known or commented on if he legally owned the shotgun as well. And unfortunately, his stepson had also previously attended the daycare that was the target for these killings. The victims of the incident were 38 deceased people, at least 24 of which were children. Several adults were also included, one of which was an 8-month-old pregnant woman. And unfortunately, most of the killings at the daycare were carried out using a knife, which resulted in a lot of head trauma, as that was the focus, it seemed, of Kamrib's violence. 10 people were injured, 6 of which were in very critical condition, and the final 3 victims were Kamrib's wife, 3-year-old stepson, and then himself. A small timeline of events to help things kind of click together a little more. Around 12:30 on October 6th, Kamrib arrived at the daycare center. Around this time, the daycare attendees had just finished eating lunch and were starting to take their nap. At 13:30, Kamrib fled from the scene in his white truck, so it took about an hour for the killings to occur. Kamrib then returned home and burnt his truck, the white truck he fled with, and killed his wife, his stepson, and himself. Right here, I have a few eyewitness and official reports. The police chief of the province came out and said, and I quote, "After inspecting the crime scene, we found that the perpetrator tried to break in, and he mainly used a knife to commit the crime by killing a number of small children. Then he got out and started killing anyone he met along the way with a gun or the knife until he got home. We surrounded the house and then found that he had committed suicide in his home." And then we have a witness account of the killings at the daycare. The shooter came in around lunchtime and shot 4 or 5 officials at the child care center first. The attacker then forced his way into a locked room where children were sleeping and attacked them. At first, people thought the shots were fireworks. And then another witness had seen him flee from the scene and said he intended to crash into others on the road. The attacker rammed a motorbike and 2 people were injured. I sped to get away from him. There was blood everywhere. And then there was a very large impact both from the responses from the government, local responses, and global responses. The government responded with the Prime Minister ordering Thailand to fly all of their flags at half-mast in respect for the massacre and their victims. He offered public condolences to the families and even met with some of the families of the victims. The King of Thailand paid for the funeral expenses of the children and adults that had unfortunately passed away, and he paid for the medical expenses of the wounded, as well as visited with the wounded and their families in the hospitals. And currently, gun laws are being evaluated by officials, which Thailand already has very strict gun laws. There was also a local response, quite obviously. A red carpet was placed in front of the daycare in anticipation for the king's visit, but it was later removed due to very large social media backlash. A memorial shrine was placed in front of the daycare, and also local paramedics were on standby during the temple services to assist with the bereaved if they became overwhelmed and needed medical attention. And there was also a very large global response. The United Nations responded to the incident, and other foreign officials also addressed the incident and offered their condolences, such as the British Prime Minister, the Australian Prime Minister, and the US National Security Advisor. Here we have the typical and modified Theravada Buddhist funeral rites. In a typical funeral rite, the services are held by monks rather than funeral directors. There's a very heavy involvement with family and community. The deceased is usually washed by the family. A coin is placed in the mouth, flowers are placed on and around the body, and a white string is tied to the hands and feet of the deceased. The deceased are placed in state in the home for a few days, usually uncovered, as you'll see in the picture in the next slide, and a formal procession is held to the cremation site. In the modified funeral rites for this incident, the families received aid from the government from a compensation fund, and the deceased were cremated very swiftly within a day or two, or they could have been buried without cremation, which is very much different from being laid in state for multiple days. Swift burial is done to protect the mourners from potentially harmful spirits. The monks held ceremonies at 3 different temples in town just to accommodate for the amount of people they had to serve. And the temples in the province refused to cremate and serve the gunman, and he was cremated 90 minutes away. And here we just have a little picture comparing a traditional Theravada Buddhist funeral rite and what it looks like compared to the modified rites for the children. And right here I just have a quick video clip that highlights the cremations of the massacre victims. And then right here we have the impact on funeral service, or more so the temples and the monks involved. There was a large emotional toll from handling a mass funeral for children, and children are held in a very, very high esteem in Thailand compared to the US. The toll of handling a mass shooting, which is a very uncommon occurrence, and just in general, it's a very tragic situation to have to deal with. There were physical demands for setting up and conducting the funeral rites, which are quite elaborate. A demand for space to cremate the decedents, as well as a personnel demand from the monks to conduct the funeral rites. And if it happened in the United States, I feel like there would have been a large demand on storage of the deceased, such as refrigeration, until crematories could be made available, since open air funeral pyres are not legal in most states. A massive demand on crematories, as I said just a second ago, and a possible need for extensive restorative art procedures, as, like I said, a lot of the wounds were to the head of the victims, and if there was a viewing, they would need to be addressed. But other than that, that's all I have for you. Here are my citations, and I hope you have a good night.